1896. My grandmother was born in 1897, so she was first generation, obviously Polish American. But then sometimes they were Heizes, and I think it depended on who they were talking to or who happened to be in power at that point. On my father's side, they're Walkowiaks and Fielkowskis, hence Fiels, and I'll tell you how that name came to be. On my father's side, my great-grandfather, I believe worked in a mill in Buffalo and was ultimately killed in an industrial accident. The family on that side was very, very, my father was at one point a member of the Communist Party, and my grandfather was one of the first people to join the Wobblies at the Ford plant in Buffalo. He was blackballed and had to go and become a merchant seaman and changed his name from Fielkowski to Fields, hence my name, because he couldn't get a job with his name. In 2003, I went to Berlin for the IFLA conference and decided that we would go and drive over to Poland, and I would sort of poke around. I knew that my father's family came from Gdansk, and my mother's family came from the area around Torun. And so I mentioned this to my mother, who is still around. She's in her 80s now, and she said, "Oh yeah, I think your cousin Sonny is like writing to somebody there." So next time I passed through Buffalo, I stopped and saw my Uncle Sonny, who bears a striking resemblance to Ron. I mean, you're a good Buffalo Polish-looking guy. Sonny, in fact, had been writing to a woman named Alina Osage. And Alina was my long-lost cousin who lived in this little town called Koronova. And Koronova is just to the west of Torun. And so we hopped into a car, drove to Gdansk, toured the city, enjoyed that, and then drove south into Koronova. Koronova, a very interesting little town, about 10,000 people that's nestled in a little valley. The town sort of has an interesting, it's sort of, a little town square. And they had a little shop that was 2 blocks off the main street. And in fact, it was a kitchen cabinet store. In fact, and then her son, Arthur, had an internet cafe that he was running in the back room. So it was kind of one of these, small entrepreneurial type of establishments. Arthur also had a job at the meat market down the street, and as a result was able to bring cold cuts home all the time, which was a very helpful job there. Alina was quite a character. She looked like Zsa Zsa Gabor's sister. She had approximately the same physique, very much, very healthy. And so we ended up going to her house, and we're there for 3 days. And she disappeared for a period of time, and everybody sort of sat around and discovered that we really couldn't talk to each other, because I can say, Dziękuję and Dope, and that's about, and some swear words, which I remember, which I did get from my grandmother. But so then she appeared in an evening gown, and she proceeded to wear an evening gown for the entire 3 days that I was visiting. And so the house was just marvelous. Every surface was covered with crystal, china. Every square inch of the wall was covered with photographs and paintings and various knickknacks and bric-a-bracs. So it was definitely an enthusiastic environment. Alina's great-grandfather and my great-grandfather was Hippolyte Heiser, and her great-grandfather was Alexander Heiser. And they and a sister and a brother, 2 brothers went to America, and the other sister and brother had stayed in Koronova. So my job was to see if I could find something about the family. Well, it turned out that Alina Alexander had married into a German family of sea captains, and as a result, she had like no interest in my father's side, because this other side was, as she would say, aristocratisch. And so she was very much, she knew the whole genealogy on that side, but as far as like my side of the family, it was like, who are these people? So we went down to the local church, and we had a guy named Tony who had lived in Chicago and Las Vegas, who was translating. He had moved back to the town. And a wonderful guy, again, looked a lot like Ron. And so Tony, we went down, and the priest, I gave him my ALA card, and he kind of looked at it, and gave me the sort of the once-over. And eventually, with a sigh, took me into the records. And we spent a wonderful evening as the sun set in the little pool of light on the old book of birth records. We found the birth records for Alexander and Katrina, but nothing for Hippolyte or the other son, who was the older one. So I did make a donation to the roof fund, which was helpful for the church. And it was interesting to be in this church because it had not changed a bit since actually I think probably the 1600s, much less the last century. So it was interesting to be in a church that I knew that my great-great-grandfather had undoubtedly gone to Mass in and looked at the same Baroque paintings and carvings. Archer went off to consult with an uncle who drank a lot. That's all I ever heard. And he, in fact, said, oh, yeah, they moved from some town outside of Cordova. So we then proceeded to spend 2 days going around to these small churches, making donations to various parking lot funds and roof funds, and looking through church records. We discovered something that all of you probably know, but I didn't know. At a certain point, it occurred to me that there were no graves in the cemetery older than 1945. And, of course, what Tony said is, oh yeah, because if you don't give them a lot of money, after 25 years they take your bones out and put them in the church and bury someone else there. Now, as an American genealogist, somehow the notion that they're reusing the graves was just like stunning, because it certainly makes going to graveyards pretty useless. So that was rather interesting. Archer then went off and consulted with some other relative who came back and said, no, we were looking in the wrong towns. Now we have to go to this other town. So, and I'm almost at the end here. Elena had, did I mention, run for mayor of the town. And she had carried the town but lost the countryside. So these forays into the countryside provided her an opportunity in her evening gown, and mind you, to go out and talk with the peasants. So every time we stopped to inquire about this family that she hadn't paid attention to, she would be there in a blue satin evening gown with a crowd of kids with beat up bicycles, and it was just, everyone would be out of the little houses talking with her. And Tony would say, yeah, she's campaigning again. Her comment on we had a conversation about life under communism, and after a lengthy discussion in Polish, which I of course didn't follow, Tony said, Alina says that life was great under communism. And then he said, no, actually, she said it was super great under communism. So she certainly was old school. And as I say, was out campaigning as we were going through these churches. We went off and found a church that was closed, came back. Alina was still there at this little juncture with about 3 or 4 farmhouses, a group of 25 women and children around her as she was like conversing with them, I guess. And so she comes back into the car, and she sits down and has a lengthy conversation with Tony in Polish. And then she goes, tak, 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 which is what she tended to say when she was expressing discouragement. Tony goes, bad news. There was a silence in the car. Alina says, there was a woman in the village who knew about the family. She died this morning at 11. So you know, I left for Krakow the next day because I had other things to do. So Leonard and I have contrasted because he, of course, found his family and has been reunited. Mine still lies out there. So I do promise to go back and dig them up, and thank you for letting me share that. It was a great trip.
Just a couple of